And today, I thank you very much, Sheriff Tim Carter, for calling in and for checking in with Shenandoah County with what I'm hoping is a monthly regular visit that we find out what's top of mind for the Sheriff of Shenandoah County. First of all, Sheriff, I wanted to congratulate you. It's been 20 years that you've served Shenandoah County. That's incredible.
Yeah. Seems like it flew by. But I've
Believe
enjoyed
that.
every minute of it. It's a great privilege to be in this position, and Shenandoah County's been very good to me.
Excellent. I know that you've seen a number of changes occur in Shenandoah County, and speaking of which, you have a new opportunity that has come up in Shenandoah County. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I'd like to talk a little bit about this process that we're going through right now. We call the positions community service deputies, and I probably should get a couple of acronyms out of the way because I may use those, and I want people to understand what I'm talking about. There's been a lot of media attention regarding law enforcement and the mental health system within the Commonwealth. But there's these things called emergency custody orders and temporary detention orders. So you have ECOs and TDOs. Now, ECOs, they're more or less what they are is an emergency custody for a person who's magistrate or some family member believes that they have a behavioral health issue, a mental health issue, that there's a likelihood that the person might harm themselves or others, and that's where the process usually begins if it's not voluntary. And then you have a temporary detention order, which is that's executed within 8 hours of the emergency custody order, and that's more of an extended period of time for a person to be evaluated and seek treatment and services. But I wanted to make sure that you understood what ECO and TDOs were before we got started. We did what other agencies have done in the past. We started to look at the amount of time it was taking of our patrol deputies and our staff with regard to these particular calls for service. And we've given our Board of Supervisors a couple of briefings on this, but just to kind of give you a ballpark at the magnitude of this for Shenandoah County alone. I mean, in 2022, I think we were responding to at least a couple a week of these types of calls, mental health, behavioral health services types of calls. And when we got involved with a ECO or a TDO, we were seeing the typical time frame for that could have been anywhere from 9.5 to 11.5 hours per event. So there are these events and these incidents that actually take a lot of resources with regard to law enforcement staff. So we were noticing those things happening, and there were a couple of things that were going on over the last couple of years. One is there was a work group that I was a part of within the state called the Marcus Alert statute or work group. And the Commonwealth of Virginia has basically set up a statute that says that law enforcement agencies, I believe the population now, they've changed this. It was all law enforcement agencies, but now they've changed that to a population of 40,000 or more, has to have a program in place to deal with issues regarding mental health and behavioral health services, calls for service. So I was part of a group that went through that process, as far as trying to give guidelines to local law enforcement and that kind of thing. And while we were going through that process, we were also noticing internally the time and the commitment that it was taking with regard to our patrol staff and resources. So in the meantime, our Board of Supervisors here approved these positions so that we could better handle these types of calls. So that's kind of where we're at this point. And I can talk a little bit about more or less what they are doing, if that's something you'd like me to go into a little bit.
Absolutely. I was going to ask what you are looking for officers to take these positions. What kind of vetting do they have to go through, and what are the qualifications for such an officer or deputy?
Well, we're looking, I mean, the two, right now, I've filled two of those positions. They're more senior deputies that have been on our staff. And quite frankly, if you're going to get involved in this, on this path, if you will, I think it's a person that needs to want to be there instead of having to be told to be there. So we are looking at more senior staff. There are going to be some training requirements that come out of the state. We all have, and most law enforcement agencies have what's called crisis intervention training. I know that all of my staff go through that, but again, that's what it is. It's crisis intervention training. So I think the requirements with regard to the state when they do come out are going to be a lot more in depth with regard to positions like these. And one of the things I probably, I'd like to talk a little bit about it because it's kind of funny how all this came about here. We had an incident here in Shenandoah County a couple years ago where it was obvious to me after reviewing the incident that we had younger staff respond to the incident and senior staff. So we started a process, a weekly process, where our younger staff go in and brief me, and they brief my administration. And we do that because it was obvious to me that younger staff were having some communication issues with senior staff on this particular call. And as we started going through those operations meetings, we also started to notice not only are we tracking the time and the effort with regard to behavioral health and mental health calls for service, but we're also noticing that we're, in many cases, dealing with some of the same people and some of the same situations. And all this came to bear as we're going through this operations meeting process. So it was helpful for us to know, okay, these are the things we're dealing with from week to week, not only from an overtime standpoint, but a shared numbers of calls for service standpoint, but also younger staff were getting involved in these things. And it was showing me that the agency was dealing with some of the same incidents, some of the same people regularly. So that's when we, all this was kind of coming together at the same time, and we were able to get these positions. Again, I think that some agencies out there, some of your more metropolitan agencies, have been doing this for a while. This is something new that we've been doing for the last 6 months or so. I'm not at this point ready to say how successful it is. I do think that the whole purpose of these deputies is that we want them to have more of a proactive stance with regard to people in our community that we know that are having behavioral health and mental health issues. So we try to reach out to that community of people before there's a crisis. And if you follow along, if you paid attention to any of the Marcus Alert statute or any of the the structure behind that particular program and initiative, the initiative basically wants there to be no intersection between a person who's in behavioral health, mental health crisis and law enforcement. And that's kind of a heavy lift. I don't know that you'll ever be at that point where there's never going to be an intersection. But our community services staff, what we're trying to get them to do is to reach out before those types of things do happen. And I think it's, at this point, I think it's showing that it's, I'm not sure if the calls are going down, but it does seem like that the crisis calls have leveled off.
Very good. Now, the need is there as we know many of the mental health institutes have shut down due to the lack of employees and things of that sort. So it's very good to have an officer on hand that is able, or a couple of officers that are on hand and able to handle with calm and collective and knowledge these types of situations, because you never know when they're going to crop up.
Right.
Correct?
Exactly. I try not to be, critical of other organizations, but I have to say this. I've been doing this now. This is my 37th year in law enforcement in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And, there's been our mental health and behavioral health system within the Commonwealth of Virginia it's really hurting. Now, some people may even go to the point that it's totally broken. I don't know that I'm at that point, but I do know that the capacity that they have is extremely limited, and it seems like over the course of time, through budget cuts and things like that, that particular area of services within the Commonwealth has really taken a hit. And so in other words, we've taken the position here. What we're doing is it's more or less a co-response group that we're establishing. And by that, I mean, my people are taking care of, what we can take care of on our end, but the Community Services Board and the local mental health and behavioral health people need to be on their end, taking care of their end. And I know that there's been a lot of stress and pressures on them with regard to staffing and funding and things like that. But my point is that you're right. You want to have both of those things converging on these issues, because I think it's better for the people that are in need of the services. I think it's better for the communities in which we live in, and it's better for those responders that are involved, as long as they know that they're getting people help that they need. A lot of people. I say this. My staff don't sit around, and I don't know of any law enforcement agency where their staff sits around during the course of the day and says, I wonder how we can screw up somebody's day today. They're called to these scenes. They're called to these incidents. And those law enforcement officers, those deputy sheriffs, they want, services to be provided to people that need those services. But I do know that right now, as you mentioned, the mental health, behavioral health system in the Commonwealth is under a lot of strain, and capacity is not where it probably should be.
Right. I have to agree, and I think it's a wonderful thing, and I hope that other agencies, I know that you mentioned metropolitan areas, but this can be a situation in a rural area just as easily as it can be a metropolitan area. So having an officer on staff is really an idea, and I think that it's really going to help. I know that there have been a couple of situations in Shenandoah County where you've had to deal with someone who is suffering from mental issues, and the need is great. It is out there in all areas. And I thank you, Sheriff, for all that information. I wish you luck on getting this new group together. Do we have a timeline on when this particular arm of the Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office will be available, or is it an ongoing thing that you're working on?
Well, we have two people now that are actually in the positions and they're doing the work. I'm certain that the Commonwealth is going to have some training requirements that they're going to have to go through once those are established. I know there's been here locally, I think there's been a change in the leadership of our Community Services Board, so I'm hoping that they're going to get up to capacity with regard to what they should be involved in. But I mean, to answer your question, we're doing this now. It's not where I think it should be, and it's evolving. But I feel good about it. I'm appreciative of our Board of Supervisors. I went to them and talked with them a little bit about the issue, and they were very receptive in making sure that we had the right people in these positions and that they were moving forward on this initiative. And So we're there now. It's just a matter of getting everybody else on board and getting the training that we're going to be required to do.
Excellent. Like a work in progress.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Sheriff Carter, thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to add to our talk?
No, I think I'd like to see hats off to the governor's administration right now, because I think they are trying to work on the capacity with regard to behavioral health and mental health in the Commonwealth. I don't think it's something that's going to change with the snap of your fingers. I think that it's taken years for it to get to the point where it is, and it's going to take years for us to get to capacity where people can get the services that they need. Again, if you go back and you follow that whole Marcus Alert work group, the plan is that wherever you are, whatever station in life you're in, wherever community you live in, you'll get the same services throughout the Commonwealth. And again, that's a heavy lift, because I know just by the work that I do and other services that are out here, that's a big lift when you're comparing yourselves to agencies and communities that have maybe a broader tax base than what we would have. But I do think that they're making progress, and I think we're making progress here in Shenandoah County.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Sheriff, it's been a pleasure talking. Thank you, Tim, and we'll talk real soon.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.